it. I know Todd's very excited. We're glad to have him here. There was a moment there where it was up in the air and he busted his tail, so to speak, to join us. So we're very excited about that. As they, you are mic'd up, and how do you sound?
I don't know how do I sound.
How do you sound?
Can you hear me in the back?
Not yet.
Okay, so
Oh, the water sounds full. Now I gotta go to the restroom. All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, Mr. McCaffrey, there you go.
press this button when it turns on.
Can you hear me in the back?
It'll turn
You're not in the back.
We'll
You
do
can
that.
do that.
It's recording right now. But
That
if it
person
turns
is
off,
after
just
this
press
back. I can hear me in the back.
you can click.
Can you hear me? Good. Good morning. Hello. Good evening. This is supposed to be Todd Rambles, and sometimes this is really cool, and sometimes this is Todd Rambles. It's hard to say. And also, I will take the odd question here and there. Usually when I do this, I'm a little bit less discombobulated. I'm going to give you a little bit of brief history. End of March, my kid walked across the street and got hit by a car. And so it's broken tibia and fibula, and lots of bruises and scrapes, but fortunately nothing worse. But just Wednesday, he had to go back for surgery to get the bones rebroken so that they could put a pin in to straighten him up. So I have a kidlet up in the hotel room and in all sorts of various and sundry pains. But that makes me think about what the future's going to be like for us. They just now have announced a pill that you can take. You can swallow this pill and then you don't have to recover it. That is equipped with sensors, which will actually keep track of whether you've taken all your other medication or not. So it will report back when it sees that you've taken this pill and that pill and the other pill. I'm kind of wondering why we just don't get some sort of implants that keeps track of us, oh look, your temperature's up and your blood pressure's up. Mr. McCaffrey, maybe you should go see the doctor. We've got an appointment scheduled for you at 3 p.m. Something to let us actually take more control of our own medical future. So that's one of the things that's kind of in my thinking right now, especially after having to deal with 2 hospitals. The kid was hit here in LA County, and so at the USC. And finally, the surgery was over in Riverside County where we live, and apparently the records don't translate. I would have thought everything would be electronic by now, and you just say, type in a name, the social security number, everything would be there. No. And they're still making notes in longhand and charts and all this, and it's like, really? I mean, how much data is lost because of this, and how come you don't have real time? I mean, even going from the emergency room up to the orthopedist, the information had to be repeated. Now, sometimes I think they're doing that to just make sure they're dealing with the same person. You're playing with that stuff over there, aren't you? See, yeah, we should also all come with our own microphones. We really could do the whole thing from Harry Potter. We point to it and go, Sonorous. Boom. Wouldn't that be scary? How many people here have been to Comic-Con? Okay, Kathleen. At Comic-Con, one of the new features in the last couple of years has been some people who've decided that they must bring us back to Jesus outside of Comic-Con, and their favorite method of assault is to get some poor 9, 10-year-old child to recite Bible verses at us over a loudspeaker. So I'm not sure the whole sonorous thing would work too well, when you get these little kids going, Then on the other hand, you probably have 10-year-olds doing Pokemon Wars as well. Maybe this is a bad thing, but we don't know. We've seen so much advances recently in the whole medical realm that are getting kind of wild. They've done a couple of them. One was they managed to revitalize. How many people here are into medicine in a big way? Biologists? Okay. Well, they've done some work now on revitalizing the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of each human cell. They managed to go ahead and take some mice, and they did a neat little experiment where they basically rebooted the mitochondria. And they did the same thing with the thymus, which is part of the hormone system of the bodies. It's kind of like, we seem to be somewhat less than 20 years away from a huge disruption in how long we can live and how well we can live. So it's kind of something to look forward to. I'm kind of out there on the, okay, so, the rules are things can change, they can get worse, they can get better. And so I kind of, as a science fiction writer, it's like, okay, well, what's the worst that could happen? And the best one I ever heard, and I'd never heard of it before, was the super volcano under the Yellowstone Park, which apparently will just basically make the West Coast go bye-bye. So we won't have anything to worry about. We kind of like, what happened over there? And that'll be it. But on the other hand, what's the best thing that can happen? What would be one cool thing that would change everything? Obvious examples are a real artificial intelligence that wasn't evil, which would really just upset the heck out of Hollywood. The other option, I suppose, is what would happen if we received incontrovertible proof that there was intelligent life on another planet, in another solar system, probably. That's kind of one of the big ones. Does anybody have a big one they're thinking of? Yes?
I did a little research. It came out November and the follow-up was in February. And it's actually a study that they did. It's terrible what they did to the mice. But they stressed the mice with the scent. Have you heard about this?
Maybe.
It's transgeneration epigenetics.
Is it epigenetics? Yeah.
Yes.
So they're studying epigenetics?
Yeah, and essentially what this doctor at the communication and what he's done is that the DNA doesn't change, the RNA doesn't decay, but the next generation, without having any exposure, had descent and had stress-related reactions based on appearance, and now it's gone to the second generation.
Yeah, I thought they were wondering whether it was going to go to the third generation. I mean, epigenetics seems to be pretty solid right now. The concept is, and apparently it's a good little Mother Nature thing, if you're living in stressful times, then you pass that sense of stress on in through the womb. And so it will, it generally tends to masculinize or androgynize females in the womb. Because basically I think Mother Nature's saying, oh look, there's not enough food here, there's a lot of stress here. You know what, we really want to cut down on our fertility rate because we can't support it right now. So you all are just going to not have kids. And be stressed and be ready to not eat a lot of other things. So it changes everything. And I thought it was hitting the methylation on the DNA, but I don't think I'm not a biologist. I'm a mechanical engineer by training and God knows what by existence.
What was interesting was that, of course, it's masking from what I can understand, but if it proves that it's there and they can come up with chemical reactions, they can remove it. And he works primarily in post-traumatic stress situations. And so it really sort of opens some neurons firing about, why can't these people make peace? Well, if they, generation after generation after generation have this, I mean, it does seem to be something more than just a logical mind working. And how that could affect society if that should be.
I certainly could see it. I mean, my other fear is that we come up with, we're working on some stuff to deal with post-traumatic stress, and the biggest fear I have is if we come up with a little pill we can give our GIs that makes them forget they were ever in combat. And basically we reset them to gung-ho, kill anybody sort of people, and no learning occurs. There was another thought that came with that. You see, this is why this is Todd's rambling. I'm trying to remember what it was. The National Institute of Mental Health has just launched, or has just recently launched, going to be probably a decades-long project to completely revamp how we look at mental health. They're basically going to throw out the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for mental illnesses and all, and they're actually going to look at brain function, and they're going to start looking at brain dysfunction from that. So I think that's going to be awesome. We'll actually get something that works, which will be cool. So that's one of the things that I'm kind of looking forward to see that happen. The other thing is 3D printing and metamaterials. They just came up with a metamaterial that can get you 10 times greater magnification than any known glass. They're, of course, they have the invisibility cloak and all this other stuff they're working on. It's kind of like I never met a material I didn't like, if you pardon the pun. And if you don't pardon the pun, I'm sorry. Anyway, so yeah, I think we're moving in a lot of places. The other thing that's really cool and sort of has me scratching my head a little bit is SpaceX and their rocket ship that's going to land on its tail in the end. But they make a case. Elon Musk says that it costs like a couple of million to make a rocket ship, and it costs about $200,000 for fuel. So if you could reuse the rocket ship, you're saving a whole bunch of money. He's planning on getting space to be very, very cheap. And my hat's off to him. We won't ask him exactly why he named his space capsule the Dragon capsule, but we might have some idea. So, any questions? Any thought? Yes?
So, what are you working on now in terms of a book?
Well, I finished something called The Steam Walker a while back, and it went out and looked for a home. It's a young adult, set in an alternate, what will become an alternate history, Scotland and England. My heroine it develops a steam walking platform. Think Imperial Stormwalker, only smaller and older. Just as Bonnie Prince Charlie comes into Edinburgh and all history breaks loose. So I've had a lot of fun with that. Another one I just recently did was a novel that I started ages back in the 80s and got 30,000 words into it, kind of went, and life happened. And then I went back and looked at it and said, well, I should delete this from my hard disk or do something with it. And I decided to do something with it. The working title of it was called Warriors in Space. The idea was that aliens that are actually out there, they've been tracking what we're doing, they've been stealing our ideas and selling them on the intergalactic community, and we're just about to catch them at it, and they want to try and cut us a deal. So it's a lot of fun, and a ton of fun with that. Another book that I've self-published, because it is also out looking for a publisher, is something called City of Angels. City of Angels is about Los Angeles. It's about what happens if an artificial intelligence comes into existence that decides that she is Los Angeles. And I liked it, Werner Vinci liked it, and gave me a marvelous blurb on it, and it's wandering around. We were trying to sell it as mainstream, because I kind of wanted it as something, not quite Michael Crichton, but something in that realm, and apparently the mainstream people were going, we can't, we don't know how to fit this. This is new. This is scary. We're gonna pass, which happens.
You said you self-published it. Is it available?
Oh yeah. If you go look at any of you'll find retailers online. You can find it in ebook format. You can also get it. It's published through CreateSpace, so you can go pick it up. At fine bookstores everywhere, as they say. For as long as we have fine bookstores. Otherwise, you're gonna have to get it in ebook format. But it's out there. It's selling, steadily. So it's a lot of fun. And then I had a really nice guy named Jordan Ellinger ask me if I would write or donate a story. Oh dear God, you are a marvel.
I thought you might want that.
Have you checked on the kid?
I was texting with him before you got downstairs for your mail.
Okay, great.
So I'll text him again.
All right. Okay. That was the famous author Mallory Reed.
Oh, come on.
Famous author Mallory Reed. She writes with such unknown people as Neil Gaiman. She's going to give him.
Anything he says, he's a liar.
I'm a liar. Yeah, and that's true. All right.
Everything else he lies.
Yeah. I knew her since she was born. So that's the fun thing. Some people in the audience are probably able to say this, that they've watched people grow up from, my God, why does anybody allow this sausage to spew up, to, oh my goodness, they've got their PhD in whatever it is, or they're doing awesomely. That's really kind of interesting. One of the things I noticed as I get more years is that certain patterns only become visible at a certain age. When you're 10, obviously you can't really think about the stuff that you're thinking about when you're 25 and you finish college. But when you get to be 50 or more, you start realizing that there's other patterns out there that you haven't seen yet. It's kind of like, what would happen? I mean, what would happen if you could make it to 1,000? I don't know. And what patterns we would see then. I was just, I'm doing taking a class in games development. I've actually done some game development, but along the way, a little bit of research came up to sort of blow my eyes out. But everybody knows about the concept of a staff year, right? You know, the work of one person per year. And when you're figuring out how long things take and also how much they cost, you generally tend to look at this number. I admit to having very strange addictions, and one of them is Pokemon X and Y, the latest Pokemon game out there. They had a staff of 500 working on it for 3.5 years. That means that they spent 1,750 staff or people years on that project, which means, if you boil it down, that one person would have taken over almost 2,000 years to make this game. Could you imagine if one person actually had a lifespan where they could sit and say, I'm going to make this game? Of course, you know, I got to say, if you spent 2,000 years making a game, it's probably going to be out of date by the time you bring it to market. That might be a problem. But you know, it's a wild thought, you know? If you could sit there and say, yeah, I know I'm going to live to be 1,000, so I'm going to spend the first 100 years doing this, and then the next 100 years I'll probably do that, and I don't know, I might take a rest for 100 years. My gosh. I don't know, I mean, the world is we've always been living on the knife edge. We're either going to go fall into the dark abyss and be lost forever and be dug up by archaeologists of alien origin or whatever millions of years from now, or we're going to continue on. And mankind seems to do that. We seem to like bouncing from extreme, well, never actually making up our mind whether we're going to kill ourselves off or become, deities. But one of the things that's really getting bigger and bigger is the whole robotics thing. The United States was the leader in it, and then we kind of gave it up to the Japanese, and then the Japanese fell asleep, and now we seem to be coming back into it. And it could be a huge, it's going to be disruptive, but it could be a huge thing for us. But what happens, we're becoming slightly more cyborg, you know? All of us with cell phones are a little bit more cyborg, we're a little bit more connected into things. Those of you who have not had the joy of running across Lois McMaster Bujold's Miles More series, strongly recommend it because she's got all sorts of cool stuff in there, including people living to be hundreds of years old, and also cybernetic implants. Like what happened if you had an eidetic memory chip wired into your brain so you could recall everything. That could be interesting. But what would happen now if we go a little bit further? We've got the quadcopter, the little aeroplane drones that you can get yourself now. I've got one on order. What happens if we become more thoroughly integrated into that? And where does ownership and integration end? Do we become sort of like a swarm of our little robots that are helping us? And we can become our own little army and things. It could get really interesting. Then what happens, you know? Well, your drone hit my drone. World War IX, you know? I don't know. Could we get, the other thing that's out there on the horizon is 3D printing, which right now, I mean, I looked at it a couple of times, I'm actually getting some 3D printers, but it sort of looked like a fad, partly because it's like cooking, you know? You can get all the ingredients you want, but unless you actually have a good recipe and follow it, you're gonna get nothing. And there are those of us who forget to turn the oven on or to turn the oven off at the right time, and what we get is inedible. So I think 3D printing might suffer from that for a while, but at some point it's going to mean that people can say, you know, I'd like to have this, and print it, have it made. And they're now being able to print organs for people, so we're moving forward. So it's all, you know, tomorrow could be great, tomorrow could be terrible. Yes, you have a hand up.
Yeah, can you go into that a little bit more?
Which?
Printing organs.
Printing, not too much more. As a science fiction author, my tendency is to know a whole bunch, or very little about a whole bunch of stuff. I'm a great generalist. But they have been working on building, part of the biggest problem with organs is you have to build the scaffolding on which they grow, on which the tissue grows. So it's not enough to actually be able to grow heart tissue. You have to be able to grow it in a heart shape. They can do this pretty easily with livers now, but they have actually got to the point where they can build the scaffolding for things like hearts, and they're working on bones and other stuff. I mean, it's just getting wild out there.
Well, they're using 3D printing for doing bones now.
Yeah,
And they actually fit the way you were. They had this one guy, his face was caved in from an accident, and they took one of those scans of his head to make it symmetrical, and they built, within a couple of days, had built him a new scaffolding for his face, so
Yeah.
he looks normal again.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I mean, compared to what we did, I mean, there are people who suffer from serious burns and other things like that, and you know it when you see them. But we're moving up to the point where you're not. The other question is the whole how much the transhumanism question. Are you not a human being if you have a cell phone? Are you not a human being if you have an artificial heart? Are you not a human being if you have your skeletal structure replaced with something that can lift buildings just for fun? When do you stop being a human being? And who gets to decide? Gosh, wouldn't that be scary? Our government, your government has decided that you are no longer a human being. A new form of slavery. So that could be like scary and wild both. What was that giving me? I had one of those little buzzing thoughts go off from that one about, in the UK, I didn't know this. I mean, this is one of the things we really like our freedoms for, but the United Kingdom can send you a letter saying, you're no longer a citizen. And they've done that a couple of times just before the CIA has killed said person. So that way they don't have to deal with any of the little ramifications about having had a UK citizen killed by a CIA drone. It's happened a couple of times. And it's kind of like, I'm glad, that it's harder to, you can't uncitizen us here. And I fear a government that does that. It's kind of, the big problem with George Orwell in 1984 was he was 30 years too early. That seems to be about it. There's a lot of, Big Brother is watching. Big Brother, not only Big Brother, Big Brother would be easy, but big consumer, big marketing companies are watching. This has been going on for years. I had a friend who told me ages back that, the amount of data that Google and other companies have on you is unbelievable. It actually kind of makes the NSA look like pikers, which is not a surprise. But we're kind of all like, well, that's okay. They can know where I am. And I'm kind of more like, I don't really mind Google knowing where I am and what I want, provided they pay me for it. They're making money off of that data. And that's fine. They have the data. If they want to make money off of it, they can give me some of it. Because I'm part of that data. But you have to hang on all the way in the back first.
Don't you think we're getting some of that back in the form of the free information provided by them?
No, I don't think so. They're not. Because I can't go to Google and say, show me all the information you have on Todd McCaffrey. They do Google alerts and some other stuff, but basically they're giving you the cheap, low-hanging fruit they don't want. But I have a fairly mixed set of opinions about Google anyway. I kind of like them for Android, which is what my cell phone runs, but Android itself is basically Linux plus. On the other hand, they did the whole Google Books thing, where they decided that they could take any book that they wanted because a library loaned it to them, and they could scan it in and provide you with reading copies online. And they're on their way to destroying writing as a creative industry. They sort of stopped and changed their tactics a little bit, thank goodness. But at one point, I had a short story in a collection called Liftport, Opening Space for Everyone, which is a collection of facts and fiction and stories about the space elevator thing. Well, the company that published it, on the inside front cover said, this should never be published electronically. If you see a copy of this electronically, it's illegal. That company went out of business. The spaceport people themselves went out of business, and somewhere along the line, they told Google, oh sure, you can go ahead and copy this. But they actually didn't have the right to do that. I owned the copyright. I gave the copyright to the publishing company that since went out of business and said, you can never put this on the internet anyway. So Google puts it on the internet. minus, oddly enough, that one page that says you're not allowed to put it on the internet. And to really rub salt in the wound, although Google would let you only read a certain amount of a book, the certain amount, or one of the certain amounts in this particular anthology was all of my short stories. I didn't get a pen. You know, so when that sort of stuff comes up, it's kind of like, wait a minute, you guys have got billions. You know, my penny, please. And this is going to be a problem. We have, there's a subculture that wants to believe that information wants to be free. And it sounds great. I mean, I hear it, yeah, that makes sense. But in reality, when you start thinking about it, none of the information we have today was acquired for free. You know, you look at the work that Isaac Newton and Leibniz did to develop the calculus, to figure out the motion of the planet, to give us the 3 laws of motion, all that stuff, took thousands of years of people doing work. It was never for free. When they were done, they published it, but it required work. All the stuff we know about how to make glass and stuff like that. It took a long time to get. Information does not want to be free. Information wants to, it fights tooth and nail to be kept away from us. We have to fight for it. So yeah, Google, no. For one thing, they would have to start off with a big mea culpa, which they've never done. But large corporations have lawyers that say you're never allowed to admit that you're at fault. Which really worries me, because we have a country now where our Supreme Court is willing to provide personhood to corporations, but without any of the personhood responsibilities. You know, when a car company willingly keeps on producing a model with a faulty switch that it knows will kill people, that's some form of manslaughter if it was a human being doing it, and there would be jail time. But in the case of GM, it was a $32 million fine. They're making billions, so it's kind of like, if we're going to say corporations aren't people, then corporations aren't people. If corporations are people, then corporations are people. We have a muddy world right now. There's a great book out by, for those of you who are into economics, by Thomas Piketty, Frenchman. So I guess it'd be Thomas Piketty, called Capital, and there's a subtitle on it. He's looking at, with a lot of data that we haven't had before about capital flows. And the big scary part is wealth tends to accrue to the wealthy and just stay there. And the only times it doesn't is when you have a massively growing economy. And that tends to inflate away their increased wealth. But otherwise, you end up with the rich and the poor. And we're seeing a lot of that in this country today, which is another one of those, things can get really scary. The last time we had stuff like this happen, or the last time we had things in this realm happen, the French had this little revolution, and it was not good. So I don't know. It is an interesting world that we all get to. Do you work with Google?
Me?
No, in the back. No? Okay, because I know people who do. I mean, they're friends of mine and all. And
No, I just live by Google Maps.
Huh?
I just live by Google Maps.
You live by Google Maps, huh? See, I started with Yahoo Maps, and I just recently looked at Google Maps because, as I say, as you can tell, I have a certain amount of not entirely sure, you guys. I also am worried about a company whose unofficial motto is "Don't be evil." That really should go without saying. So maybe you could pick a better motto, like do good or do unto others as you would have done unto you, or just something nice. But "Don't be evil" leaves a lot of latitude, and of course it's like the famous one of God, who was it? It might have been Ashcroft or something. Back when they were setting up the Patriot Act, they were saying, well, you have nothing to worry about if you've done nothing wrong. And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, who gets to define wrong? That's the issue. Google, we'll see. The history, I was a software engineer for the longest time, and still kind of am. I build computers for fun. I'm a geek, I admit it. But the history of the computing industry is a history of people making mistakes and other people exploiting them. One of the famous ones is probably the Osborne computer. Anybody remember the Osborne computer? Okay, yeah. Some of us, this was the first laptop. It was the size of a big sewing machine. It weighed about 50 pounds, but you could actually drag it around the place. And it had a little 5-inch screen and some old, I think it had some advanced 5¼ inch floppy disk drives that had 160K each. No, actually it had one. but it was selling insanely. It was just going well. And then they made the mistake of saying, oh, well, our new model's going to be out soon and it's going to be better. So everybody stopped buying the Osborne 1 because they wanted to wait for the Osborne 2. Sales plummeted, income plummeted, and they couldn't develop the Osborne 2 and they went out of business. So that's one of the great mistakes. The other greatest mistake is probably, well, there are many of them, but one of my favorite, as in most infamous mistakes, was AT&T's deciding that nobody really ever wanted this Unix operating system. Those of you who are, unless you're running an Apple, unless you have an Apple iPhone, if you're running any other cell phone, aside from those poor people running Windows 8.1 on a cell phone, and that's another one of those great historical making mistakes, you're running Android, which means you're running Linux, which means you're running the heir of Unix, as it were. So it's a kind of a weird old operating system. I could talk about operating systems for years and enjoy myself. I'm not sure about the rest of it. You had a question.
And I don't remember what it was because we went off on a tangent and my brain followed.
Yeah, this is why it's Todd rambles. You know, I'm tangent, and that's kind of sometimes, as I say, sometimes this can be really cool, and sometimes it can be. So, any other questions out there? I scared you all already. No? Well, let me ask you. Okay. Has anybody got? What would be your favorite disruptive technology? Disruptive thing. Artificial intelligence, finding alien life, discovering we can live past 2,000 years. Alien life. So what do you think would happen if we found it? How would the reaction be here on the planet Earth?
So the complicating factor, one of many complicating factors would be human beings believe that we're unique, that we're uniquely reflections of God. And C.S. Lewis actually experimented with this with his Perambulation series.
I read it and I'm still appalled.
And the whole thing is, all of the world's religions would have to reevaluate man's place in the universe if we found intelligent life that wasn't human.
Oh. Did you know that the Roman Catholics examined the question in like 1520 AD and decided there probably is intelligent life in the universe?
I didn't know that. And
it blew me away when I learned about it. It's kind of common. So yeah, some of them were thinking about this stuff. Okay, and a public service announcement, we're still looking for the Amber Alert. If anybody sees an orange Nissan Quest in the lobby, please let us know. 2004 orange Nissan Quest. Yes, sir.
Did they not already find life on Mars with water? I mean, it's bacterial.
They haven't found proof of bacterial life, and that doesn't count as far as I mean. From where I sit, that's cool, but there's a difference between finding a microbe on another planet and actually knowing for a fact that it was not one we brought with us by mistake, and finding ET. And that's what I'm talking about, is, something like ET, something like we find a Dyson sphere, incontrovertible, or a ring world, something's got to have made the ring world. They don't evolve, there's no way. But there will be a group of physicists trying to prove that you can have a ring world. Just because, something like that, ring world would probably be the best.
But is that not the first step?
What?
Towards acclimating people to the fact that there could be, if you find something that we didn't bring with us, was that not the first step for people to start thinking? Maybe there's something else.
I think we're well past the first step. I think that, the fact that we can have movies like E.T. and Avatar have gotten us way past the first step. It's kind of interesting. Heck, I want to say Forbidden Planet, but it's not. It's The Day the Earth Stood Still, when the aliens came. That's over half a century ago now. And for that matter, we had the whole UFO craze and plague, for that matter, in World War II, where people were seeing all sorts of strange things. And there's that marvelous Twilight Zone episode with young Bill Shatner and the gremlin on the wing, if you remember.
Yes.
Superman.
Huh?
Superman.
Yeah, it was Or we've been dealing with this issue for a while now. But of course, alien has also always, the argument among the literati is that when we talk about aliens, we're really referring to the other. And among science fiction people, when we talk about aliens, we're talking about aliens. So it's going to be interesting. I suspect that frankly, I'm confused. I mean, because I've been wandering around science fiction conventions since I was 12. And so my worldview is kind of warped by the people I hang around. But we had a famous TV show, well, two of them, at about the same time. Mork and Mindy, and Alf. So everybody on the planet, well, everybody in America, that's not everybody on the planet, but unfortunately went into syndication.
Why make a Martian? Why make a
Oh yeah, well, yeah, but you see, I love Ray Walston. He was marvelous in picket fences, but as an adult, my favorite Martian, sorry. But yes, still there. So it's all, it's kind of, I think we've actually sort of grappled with the notion that there might be intelligent life out there. One of the fun things about growing up in the science fiction community is discovering the things we didn't think of. My favorite one was, we all knew we were going to get to the moon. Nobody ever thought we were going to get a live television broadcast of it. Nobody. There's no science fiction that I know of where they said, oh yeah, we got a live television broadcast. I think somebody at one point said there was something similar to that, but mostly we didn't get it. The other one we didn't get that's really interesting is, we thought we'd be able to find alien life. We never thought we'd be able to see planets orbiting or to detect planets orbiting other suns from within our own solar system, from Earth even. That's one of those, wow, didn't see that one coming. So it's one of the cool things about looking at science fiction is looking at the blind spots that it has. And they're not, they're not really blind spots, it's just sort of like when people were writing the stories, they're writing about the technology they have and that didn't have it elsewhere. You put your hand up.
Well, actually, Piers Anthony wrote a book, I think, called Macroscope.
Oh, that was after the moon.
Was that after they? But that was wasn't that before they found planets orbiting other worlds? And that,
Did he have something on that? I can't remember. I mean, Macroscope was such a cool book.
in Macroscope, they had this ability where it was obviously through I think it was through collecting light or whatever, but they could see other planets and the history of other planets orbiting other worlds. So, but it certainly wasn't through using just kind of basic spectroscopic technology.
Yeah, okay. So I'll accept that correction with the, Piers Anthony got it.
Got close.
Well, kind of. I mean, science fiction never gets it spot on because it's not its job anyway. Its job is to sit there and throw out wild ideas and see what happens. And what does happen if I become, do I incorporate and become Todd McCaffrey the Swarm? When I have all my different electronic devices wandering around, do I bother to incorporate? Do I keep it a secret from everybody? And what do you do when you get information that you've been collecting in secret that could change things? Ooh, scary stuff. But Macroscope was a good story. It was the first Piers Anthony I'd read, and I was really blown away by it. I'm sort of sorry that he's got himself lost on Central Ohio now. But that happens. There's this old problem. If somebody says, I'll give you millions and millions of dollars if you do this, and nothing if you do that, there's a tendency to sort of be attracted towards the comfortable millions of dollars. There are people every now and then saying, oh, no, I'll take the nothing. It's more fun. But a lot of times, when you have a series that takes off, the tendency is to see people say, well, oh, you want to write another science fiction novel, but you've got this best-selling fantasy series? Well, we'll give you lots of money for the best-selling, you get locked in. So, more questions and comments? Yes, sir.
So what are your thoughts on neural interfaces directly into humans? Because that scares me.
Well, it's interesting you should say that. I had a story that I started when I was 14, and happily shelved it, but the concept was, among other things, the core concept was, what if we developed something that could go ahead and reprogram your memories? So that we could take a criminal and excise those things that put that person on a criminal path and rehabilitate them really. And I had being a 14-year-old, I had an Adolf Hitler-like character that was their constant rehabilitation thing, and this character would always break out of the reprogramming. But along the way, sort of in that same universe, I had a guy who'd been blinded and got artificial eyes that could see everything electromagnetic. So he could tune in for IR, he could tune in for X-ray, he could tune in to see electrical wiring in the walls and all this cool stuff. And I thought that was kind of key, kind of neat. I think the biggest problem is interface, is accepting it. You've got people who suffer from synesthesia. All right, try to say that. Somebody got it out there. I'll try it again. Synesthesia. That's the one where your feelings are cross-wired, or I should say your senses are cross-wired. So you may smell blue, as it were, or hear onions. Everything's getting wrong, they cross-wired. So what would it be like if you got that information overload? Your brain's kind of used to programming. But this gets back to cognitive development, which goes back to City of Angels, oddly enough. I would suspect that after a while, you would get used to it. They're already seeing some of this. There's guys working with Oculus Rift to do 3D virtual worlds and stuff, and also to help people who are paraplegics. And so they're finding, when you get into the Oculus Rift, you're obviously right up against that uncanny valley. How many people have heard of haven't heard of uncanny valley? Okay, so the uncanny valley is this thing in animation where the closer you get to looking completely realistic, there's some little point where it just goes bizarro land. We can look at 1920s cartoons of characters drawn and go, oh yeah, okay, that's Snow White, that's Cinderella, okay, 30s and 40 characters. But when you get to the latest and the best CGI work we've got, and you're trying to do a human being based on that, for some reason you look at that and go, that's not a human being, or that person's scary weird. That's this uncanny valley where we're real close but not close enough. So you might see that there. We might, it'd be interesting. The other question is, how do you, one of the cool things is this National Institute of Mental Health research into really looking at brain function as a brain function now, instead of saying, you're crazy, because you do this, you're crazy. Instead of saying, your brain is working this way, and we can see that it happens to be because of X, Y, P, Q, and R. And then, of course, we have the whole problem of what is sanity, because sanity is actually a social convention. We really define sanity as being within acceptable bounds. I can say that somebody who's running around, I personally tend to say that people who run around with machine guns and kill everybody indiscriminately are not sane, because they're operating outside our normally accepted bounds of society. The DSM has a slightly different set of definitions for non-compliant behavior, but at some level, and very scary because it's affecting our kids, some of this is really societally based. You get ADHD. That's a real diagnosis. I know people who have it and everything. And ADD, but at some level it boils down to this child will not sit quietly in their seat while I am lecturing from 30 feet at them. They fidget. Well, yeah, they were, guess what? Human beings were actually not bred to sit in rooms listening quietly. Why are we trying to teach human beings in rooms listening quietly? I argue that, if you want to teach people how to multiply, you should get them up in a little group, teach them how to set themselves up in rows and columns and play with it, march around the place. Okay, everybody split into 2 groups, okay. How many's in each group, and what would we call these groups, Well, we call them half of the original, right? You can actually feel it, see it, do it. But no, we're going to have these little squiggles that we call numbers on the line, and you're supposed to figure that out, and you sit in your chair and you don't move. It's going to be interesting. And that the NIMH initiative, the new initiative, I guess, to actually see how brains are working, may be really huge. The next question is, once we know how they work, what can we do to tweak them? And then, of course, we get the people who say, well, you're not allowed to because God said no, or whatever, which is kind of like, okay, let's not go there today. But the other fun one is, we're beginning to understand that we have had this belief that the brain is the center of everything, and the brain rules everything. Of course, the belief comes from the brain. It's kind of like, we all know this. I just recently, I don't know how many of you have run across brain misfunctions in your own brain. I just recently had one, and I'll share it with you. I met somebody whose name was spelled, it's your wife's fault it's so normal. I met somebody whose name was spelled, and I'll spell it out loud. You'll have no problems. C-L-A-R-A. My brain kept on going, no, C-A-R-L-A. You know, the name was Clara. My brain was saying Carla. And I would literally fighting with my brain, going, no, you've got this name wrong. But Carla was the name that those letters, my data retrieval system was pulling up those letters in that format. C-A-R-L-A is the way it came out. It could not be C-L-A-R-A. You're wrong. You know, every time I've heard a name with those letters in it, it's been Carla, not Clara. How dare you? So I literally had to fight. I spent time memorizing it, writing it down, going, no, Brandon, you're wrong. And it's still get it. In conversation, you have a hand up, I'll give you a second. But in conversation, you get it. The other thing that my brain has for a long time had, actually it's not my brain, it's my eyes, or maybe it's my brain, it's hard to say with brain. But with navy blue and black in low light situations, I cannot distinguish between them. A lot of people can't do that. I mean, we have people who are colorblind and all, but it was one of those, here's a difference that I can actually see and observe and comment on. Well, the Clara one is even better, but all the same. So our brains are different. What happens when we start being able to say, let's push it up? I mean, what happens when what are we when we can interface with a really usable supercomputer on a neural level? I don't know. You know, do we become unthinkable? Do we become insane? Well, we're clearly outside, normal society rules. So it's a huge question. Did that help at all? Did I strangle up your mind? Has anybody else had things where they've discovered that are, you had your hand up, yeah?
So what I was going to suggest about the Clara thing, now I can't even say.
Yeah.
Is that there's this thing that works its way around the internet and finds its way out on signs, where they take words, and as long as the first letter and the last letter are in the right order, and they mix up all the middle words.
You can read it, yeah.
You can read it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's part of the problem.
That might be part of the problem. Yeah, we generally tend to look at the first and last letters, and we make an assignment. The other one, the one that I loved, I haven't seen him much because he's getting much older now, but a great doctor scientist named Jack Cohen, who studied microbiology, I believe, but he was all over the place. He pointed out that as we get older, we seem to have trouble finding words. He said that really we should be rethinking that. It's not that we have trouble finding words, it's that we have too many possible matches for the word we're looking for. We're sitting there going, yeah, it could be red, or it could be, what is it, chartreuse, is that the right one? No, that's the green word. Crimson, yeah, it could be crimson, it could be pink, or it could be, but basically we come up with phrases, I want to give you this word, but here's 20 of them. And then you're sitting there, you're stuck on which one do I take? Whereas when we're little, we're lucky to have one word that describes what we're looking for, and we go with that. So some of what we describe as aphasia or getting old, or what did my mom call it, data retrieval malfunction, is not so much data retrieval malfunction as in filtering. Now, what happens when you get connected up to something that you, I don't know. I mean, how much time do I have? 2 minutes. 120 seconds. You told me 2 minutes, but I have 120 seconds, man. I have 120 billion nanoseconds. Well, anyway, so for a computer, I could do a lot, but unfortunately. Where were we before I sidetracked myself on that one?
Crimson.
Crimson, yeah, we were at Crimson, but we went over Crimson, and I was trying to get to somebody that was fun. Data retrieval malfunctions. Wyrd, there was something in New Scientist, which is one of my favorite reading for getting everything, talking about hierarchical organizations. And fundamentally, if you look at it, single cell, whichever is the first, prokaryotes or eukaryotes, the simplest bacteria, the simplest things that you can get that are living are, when they form into multicellular organisms, they're much more stable. Their environment is much better. As you build hierarchies, your environment gets much more stable. And Wyrd and I are both hoping that when we get an AI, a real honest-to-goodness AI out there, that we'll actually add a layer of stability to our layer of social interactions, just like we add a layer of stability to the bacteria in our gut, which is our reason for existing, by the way, according to the bacteria in our gut. We're really there to just provide them with a safe home to digest food. That's our job. All this art and other stuff is just kind of like, I don't know what those big cells are doing, but I'm happy. And oddly enough, when you're not happy, when those cells, those nice little microfauna and bacteria in your gut are not happy, you're not happy. So I guess the bacteria are definitely winning. So what happens when we get a higher intelligence, a new level on top of us? Things should probably get easier. That will be cool. We'll be able to do more stuff. I'm pretty sure the bacteria in my gut are just thrilled most days. There will be the occasional hot tamale or something like that, and something may not like that. But it's possible. So the future may be really interesting. And I guess I'm out of nanoseconds now. Any final, anything? Really?
Any chance Stephen Hawking's brain will be the first one to be transplanted?
Oh, please God, no. He's an interesting person, but he strikes me as a very conservative physicist. He tends to be proving what has gone before rather than asking what can come next. I much prefer people like Skip Thorne, who look at possibilities beyond. And for that matter, we didn't get started on dark matter and dark energy. It's like, oh hey, 94% of everything in the universe we don't know about. Well, that's cool. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and it was fun.